This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Forget the frustration of picking commerce platforms when you switch your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling wherever you sell. With Shopify, you'll harness the same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/tech.
District of Conservation is sponsored by CFACT. To learn more about our sponsor, head over to cfact.org. Thank you so much for listening. Welcome to District of Conservation. I'm your host, Gabriella Hoffman. This podcast offers a sober examination into all things hunting, fishing, shooting sports, energy, environment, and the public policy surrounding it. And this podcast also specializes in original interviews that you won't hear elsewhere. Here's what I have for you today. I have an exciting conversation for you all today. We're going to talk to one of my new friends and fellow colleagues, Shakira Jackson. She is a firecracker, and if you don't know her, you're going to get to know her throughout this episode. Here is a brief biography about Shakira. She is a policy analyst for the Committee for Constructive Tomorrow, CFACT, which also sponsors this show, and host of the Capital Pink video series. She is a proactive communicator, community organizer, environmentalist, fossil fuels activist, and political commentator who longs to live one day in a world that enhances the fruitfulness of the earth and all of its inhabitants. Her biggest aspiration is to bring all environmental coalitions together toward that end. She graduated from the University of Pittsburgh in 3 years with degrees in history and political science, and she has since been an active volunteer and political activist in both Philadelphia, her hometown, and Washington, D.C., and she is also a graduate student at Georgetown University right now, all well before the age of 25. Very impressive young lady, someone I have been looking forward to working with and introducing to you all. So here is my conversation with Shakira Jackson. Get to know her. Shakira, it is so good to have you on my podcast. Thanks for joining.
Thank you so much for having me.
We have been trying to make this happen forever. I'm glad we're doing it now. And it'll be out later today, which is amazing because I think people should hear your story. You're a phenomenal young activist, and I was amazed to find out you're only in your early 20s. You're barely out of college. You're in graduate school, and you just impressed me so much. And we finally were able to connect in person. You work with us at CFACT, and you're just very animated about energy and environment. What led you to be so animated about these issues?
Sure. So I think one of the biggest things for me growing up was environmental health. I really was just kind of blown away by, just the lack of knowledge when it came to nuclear waste and, disposal. And that was kind of like my first interaction to the environmental world. But even outside of that, I was involved with my community gardens in the city of Philadelphia. So really just kind of, being outdoors, trying to get more specifically young people engaged in taking care of our environment and our community. And since then, I've just been an advocate for, just growing your own products, your food, being able to take care of our land. I've even had some activism going on at my previous university when I was still at the University of Pittsburgh. I served as a fellow, making sure folks are aware of, the overfishing and the pollution that's going on. So just really spreading awareness and creating those educational pillars for our, young people for tomorrow. Because after all, I think that's, one of the reasons why CFACT exist in the first place. We're equipping young people and just environmentalists in general, how they could get more involved, see the facts for what they are, and just expand from there.
And why do you think a limited government kind of individual-led environmentalism is more preferable, let's say, to a top-down big government approach?
Yeah. So for as long as I can remember, my parents, they definitely are big advocates for, big gov sucks. And, they definitely explained to me why I should take such side. And, they didn't necessarily put their ideologies or, thought processes onto me. They were just like, look, we'll give you food for thought and do your own research and, we'll see where it goes from there. But I think for me, I've always kind of just really done my own research to see what is going into, these big corporations, big government. And, I even sat in multiple meetings to discuss why this is a really prominent issue because, we just need people, we need equal representation, I feel like, at the table. And when you have 50 million people making decisions, important decisions, especially about our environment, things get unorganized, things just kind of go downhill versus when you have, small government, it's more, concrete, and you're able to really just take those, viewpoints and synthesize them into ways where, you can get effective work done because after all, government, in my opinion, it's more advantages when it's small than it is when it's big. And, the less we took to solve government, when it comes to solving problems, even thinking about, taxpayers and how they pay money and different programs and salaries, benefits, all of these things are kind of contribute to why I think, big gov sucks. And we just kind of need to hone in on those, individual liberties and prosperities, I feel like, as CFACT likes to say.
Absolutely. And with respect to environmentalism, which policies have largely concerned you recently? And I also want your take on environmental justice because we hear that start to be dropped more. I want your thoughts on both of those ideas, if you can elaborate.
Sure thing. So I think in regards to environmental issues today, one thing for me has to be like waste management, thinking more to like waste disposal and how, natural bodies of water, including, like fresh water, salt water, how they're often polluted and, with untreated wastewater. And so I think that's pretty much where I am in regards to like current environmental issues and something that I've been really getting into. And even, our President Craig, he loves the whales. So I have been
Yes.
trying to, get more involved in the whale fight as well, because, it's such a really important topic. And I feel like it's well overlooked. No pun intended there, because it's just, we're seeing, with climate change and, the different developments there, toxic contamination, there are many threats to our whales. And people, they fail to realize how much of a pillar that whales are to our society. And even when you think about, global warming, I guess, when it comes to, whale watching and, ozone pollution, all those things, they're definitely just like big threats to our whales. And I think those issues should be addressed. And then to your second question about environmental justice, I think, yes, this is a very, very important issue to tackle as well, because I literally just was doing a podcast interview for, CFACT Capital Pink podcast, wink, wink, check that out when you get a chance. But, environmental justice has been one of those things or terms per se that has been so misconstrued by, I would say the left or liberals, because they kind of, they've what's the word I'm looking for? They have shifted, I feel like, what environmental justice means, into their own terms. And, it's quite sad. I think being able to know, specifically being a minority, coming from, where I've come from, when I think of environmental justice, I think about social movements. I think about people having unfair exposure, when it comes to, communities, from when it comes to, when I was mentioning waste earlier, no, that's a big thing. When it comes to land uses, and even like the movement, I feel like as a whole has kind of been just a big fight to educating people on, environmental harms and, just how it's been contributed across the board. But I think we've kind of lost this true definition of what environmental justice is even supposed to mean. And, with politics getting involved, especially now more than ever, we've been seeing a very just concerning topic just arise because there's just so much misinformation and, people just kind of, like I said, tampering with the definition of what environmental justice means. And so I think my hope is that people would do their own research and, know that the challenge per se, when it comes to environmental justice, when you think about environmental and climate justice, it's a civil rights issue, right? And we all depend on kind of the physical environment and its boundary, and so just kind of leading more to why we care about certain things, letting people know, especially minorities and people of color, like water, food, clean air, all of these things are so prominent, but don't let anyone sell you short. And I think that's the message that we should be spreading.
Yeah, I was actually at a Capitol Hill hearing recently for these issues for IWF, and I was listening to Cori Bush, who is a ranking member on the subcommittee for oversight relating to energy issues. And she was saying that environmental justice is phasing away from fossil fuels and pushing so-called clean energy alternatives. Does that fit into the framework of environmental justice? Because those policies, as we know, in my understanding of it, really burden those in more impoverished areas, minority communities in particular, because the trade-offs of these so-called transitions leave those most vulnerable sharing the burden of the cost. They're paying more. It's not cheaper energy by all accounts. So what do you take from, let's say, Congress people like that who say that decarbonizing is a way to advance environmental justice?
These are the same people that pushed these sustainability goals, the UN, and, we can go on and on about that conversation, right, with the sustainability goals. But I think, they have lost the true definition, as I echoed earlier, about, environmental justice, because, like I said, when I think about environmental justice, is equal access to natural resources. And right now, we're definitely not seeing that, I feel like, shift out and play at all. And when you think about kind of the reduction of social inequalities, the equitable payment of ecological debt, there's so many small things that a lot of people don't even know about, and so many issues that go into the environmental justice fight that I feel like are being overlooked on the Hill. So when we sit down and we make important decisions, specifically our legislators, about things such as, water infrastructure, or, kind of even going back to the goods of the movement, thinking about like commercial transportation, or even farm workers, right? I don't think no one's thinking about how this is impacting the small person, right? It's always kind of like going back to your question earlier, right? Why the difference between big and small, big gov sucks. At least I feel like with small government, they're taken to an account, the people at the bottom, and we need to be working from the bottom up and not from, the top down.
I would hope that also gas stove bans do not fall under environmental justice, because to kind of improve and retrofit your kitchen, especially in the city, doesn't matter what your racial background or socioeconomic status is, it's very expensive for everyone. So I hope that does not fall in line with environmental justice.
Yes. And I mean, even thinking about electrical cars, there are so many things that, man, and it's crazy because this is not like the typical conversation that a lot of our young people are having. And it bothers me so much because they'd rather be on Twitter, arguing about the latest tea, when it's like, this stuff is close to home to you. Why don't you care about these issues? And so that's what really grinds my gears as well. I'm so glad you mentioned the gas stoves, because I think that's a really big issue when it comes to, carbon poisoning, especially if they are kind of like installed incorrectly and not properly, vented or maintained. And, there's so many things there, but lots to unpack, Gabby, lots to unpack.
Speaking of young people, you're obviously a part of Generation Z. And what I've noticed as a millennial, I'm kind of in midway through millennial. I'm kind of like a middle-aged millennial. I'm not exactly on the upper end, the old end, but I'm in the middle of what a millennial is, because I was born in the early 90s. And I've seen a lot of Gen Zs, and even a little bit in millennials. It was a little bit evident there, but Gen Z, and it worries me that they think that the planet is on fire. They believe we're in a climate catastrophe. And you look at all the trends, there's less ozone depletion, emissions are a lot lower, the standard of living is a lot higher, especially here in the United States. We tend to do clean air, clean water, very good compared to a lot of our counterparts. Nothing is perfect, but I would say we uphold a lot of things. But a lot of young people, Gen Z and younger, have kind of this negative view of living, and they don't want to get married and have kids, and they think that it'll contribute to a carbon footprint. How do you get across to these young people? I know your show aims to do that, but in your personal opinion, what can be done to kind of recapture these young people and tell them, hey, everything's going to be okay. The environment is not on fire. We can make improvements, but generally things are okay. And we don't need government to get in the way to make things worse or exacerbate problems.
I think that's a really great question. And part of my work is literally in the field activism. When I am not behind the chair, doing episodes for Capital Pink, I am out there, in schools and just being the light that our young people needs to see, because it starts with representation and it starts with those, just small seeds. And that's why I think I became, a fellow for CFACT, when I was still in undergrad, because I saw that, hey, I shouldn't be waiting for someone to come and save me. I shouldn't be waiting for that. And I think that's the mindset that we're seeing right now with our young people. It's more so, it's so easy, right, to point the finger and, say, oh, well, this is happening because of them and, X, Y, Z. But, no one takes initiative to come up with solutions or to go and here we go, see the facts. Right. And so that's what I try to do. Just kind of, like I said, spreading the awareness in the field activism, especially because, scientifically proven, I've done a lot of like campaign trainings and stuff like that. And they say like, the best way to get through to, voters and getting more folks or mobilizing communities is to have that one-on-one face interaction. And so really being out there advocating on Capitol Hill, creating content, a lot of our Gen Z is on social media. So that's the biggest platform right now that, I've been trying to use to get through to some of our young people. But it's going to start with, it's time consuming as it may sound, changing our Gen Zers, one Gen Z, one Gen Z at a time. That's kind of where I feel like we can start and then kind of expanding from there. But, a lot of our young people, as you mentioned, they feel discouraged. They are not, they're not doing their own research. They're just kind of seeing what they see on social media, which is, the pro and the con, me contradicting my own ways. But it's true. Although I try to push, factual information on my social media platforms, et cetera, there's a lot of disinformation, misinformation out there. And so, part of my research that I do at Georgetown is just being able to say, well, how do we kind of combat some of this misinformation and disinformation that's happening across the web? And part of it is just trying to overpower, I guess, the folks that are spreading this misinformation. And that's just by putting out more factual information and, leading folks to places where they can find the sources to back certain things up. And yeah, it just starts from there, grassroots organizing.
It really does. And I don't think they're entirely lost. There are some, unfortunately, who concern me, and I don't think we'll be able to reach them. But I think there's a good portion in the middle, the mushy middle, who are open to hearing different things. Maybe they just have information overload from very biased sources and they don't know what is actually happening. And then you see conflicting reports of these different climate scenarios and you see that everything is catastrophic and it's all doom and gloom. But there's a lot of things to celebrate. And I think I try to do that too, going to different campuses, even though I am a millennial. I try to be positive. I try to reach people in the middle who may not agree with my politics or even my thinking of conservation, and just kind of inject them with a dose of reality, not force them into it, of course, but to present, an alternative view so they can be in the know of like, things are positive, nothing is perfect, but we would rather be in the situation we are here with cleaner air, cleaner water, being able to have a say at the table on these environmental decisions, even though this administration, in my view, is trying to limit stakeholder input. And that's not good. That's not productive to energy and conservation issues. You need to have everyone have a seat at the table, not just special interests that back a certain party. And so, Shakira, where can everyone follow you and connect with you and follow your podcast? Plug that in again as well, because I would love people. You're a rising star, I would say, and I want people to connect with you. We're going to work a long time together, I have no doubt, and I hope we get to collaborate on more projects through CFACT as well. But I want people to connect with you and learn more about your efforts. So dish away with all the appropriate links if you can.
Yes, absolutely. So you could find me on all social media platforms. I have the same tag. It's my name, Shakira Jackson, but it's spelled with a 0. So SHAKIRAJACKS0N. And you can find me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. You can find it the regular way, Shakira Jackson. But unfortunately, the regular way for everything else was unfortunately taken. So I had to go the unique route way. But that is okay. But Gabby, I wanted to end one more point on what you were saying. I think a lot of people also, specifically Gen Zers, they're kind of experiencing, I would say, a climate anxiety now. I feel like is a good way to put it, because of the amount of information that they've been seeing, and just when it comes to the media and the overload. So I'm just hoping that they can find some way to cope with it outside of just being flushing and digesting all of this information, just figuring out how they can distinguish the two, how they can do their own research, and of course, how they can see the facts.
That's extremely important, because young people are the future. And if they are just predisposed to, respond to everything negatively, it's not good for society. And I think those of us who kind of grew up with a hybrid of no technology and then a little bit of insertion of technology into our kind of daily lives, I think we can help them. You have to lean on us millennials to help you guys too. So any way we can, we shall. And I mean that on an individual level too. But Shakira, lovely to have you on my program. We're going to be recording something shortly for yours. And I hope you come back again and we can discuss more issues.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Make sure you're connected to us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And also on your preferred player, we recommend Apple Podcasts, where you can leave us reviews if you really like the content. Share the podcast with friends who may be interested in learning more about what's trending in conservation and the related industries that entangle with it and sometimes work against it as well. Thanks for listening to the show, and stay tuned for the next episode.